So for a long time, some of you might know this, but for a long time, and by a long time, I mean like a very, very long time, one of my favorite shows of all time was Forrest Gump. I had watched it enough that I actually had every part of it memorized, everybody's lines. I could basically recite the entire movie without it even being turned on. As a matter of fact, one time in Chicago for work, I was in Chicago for work, and Chandra and Jaden had gone with me, and we went down to the Navy Pier there in Chicago, and just so we could eat at a restaurant that was relatively new. There's only a few locations at the time, called Bubba Gump Shrimp. And as a matter of fact, it looked like this, and this is the restaurant we actually literally went to on the Navy Pier. Back then, it was a relatively new restaurant, few locations, and one of the things they used to do, I don't know if they still do this, haven't been there for years, but one thing they used to do for fun was when they'd come to your table, they would ask you trivia questions about the movie. And so by the time our meal was coming to a close, since there were very few in the restaurant, it kind of became somewhat of a game and a challenge amongst all the staff to stump us at our table. And finally, they came up with a question they thought for sure that I could not answer, and which honestly never was spoken about in the movie, but it was briefly seen in a picture in the midst of the movie, and even so I knew the answer. And then what was the question? The question was simply this: when Forrest was in China playing ping pong, who was the ruler? Well, you see very quickly, as they show him in China, a picture of Chairman Mao. All right? And so I happened to know that and answered it was Chairman Mao. And they were very, very surprised by that and a little bit frustrated, I believe, as well. But this reminds me of one of our chapters tonight, the idea of Forrest Gump. It was, what it reminds me of is when Forrest began, as many of you know, if you've never seen the show, that's, whatever. But Forrest began running. Right? As an adult, as a child, he fell in love with running, but then he began running, and do you remember, as an adult, he began running. He started on his porch, he took off, and he began running. Do you guys remember why he started running? That's right, right? He'd lost his mother. He got disappointed by his love of his life, Jenny, who told him she didn't want to marry him. And so he says this, and this is literally what he says, that day, for no particular reason, I decided to run a little. So I ran to the end of the road, and when I got there, I thought maybe I'd run to the end of town. And when I got there, I thought, well, maybe I'll just run across Greenbow County. Well, when I got to there, I figured since I'd gone this far, I may as well run across the state of Alabama. And I did that, and for no particular reason, I just kept on going. I ran clear to the ocean, and when I got there, I turned around and ran to the other ocean. Figured since I'd gone this far, I might just turn back and ride on and keep on going. So along the way, Forrest, to remember though, would be interviewed, right, by some people as he's running along the way. And they asked him, what are you running for? This is back in the 80s when there's supposed to be all these causes. What are you running for? AIDS, for the starving children in Africa. What are you running for, right? And they're asking him all these things, what are you running for? And he said, I just felt like running. And when he was done running, and many others had begun running with him, he said this, and I thought this was a great way to end his run. He said, my mama always told me that you have to put the past behind you before you can move on. And that was, I think, I was running. I had run for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. And then he stops, he turns around, and he looks at the whole crowd behind him, and he says, I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go home now. And that was the end of his run. Now, this is a part of the story and it's going to sound weird to say why this reminds me of this, because it reminds me of this part of the story of the children of Israel. In the retelling and what Moses is doing tonight, we'll see tonight, because what I want you to remember as we read through tonight's retelling is these words from Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 7 says this to us. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. So with that, let's get into it tonight. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 1 says, Then we turned and took our journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord had spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir many days. Now, there's something about the retelling of the entire wilderness wandering time. This is it. This is the verse that he says that does the whole retelling of those 38 years, in essence, that they were in the wilderness. Verse 1 is that period. All right? He's telling the whole time. But what's interesting is when you first glance at this, right, at the wanderings, right, when we look at this, it says they compassed or circled round about Mount Seir. Now I want you to think about that, right? When you picture the Israelites in their wanderings, don't you kind of picture this amazing big journey? They're all around and going like all over throughout the land and throughout the Middle East and down into the Sinai Peninsula and then back over, into what would be now Saudi Arabia. And I mean, you kind of picture them kind of wandering all over the place. But it literally says they compassed Mount Seir. Literally going in circles around one mountain range for 38 years. All right? It was actually Mount Seir, and this makes a difference in wandering, being around Mount Seir. So, because when we picture that idea of where they were at, out of curiosity, how many of you picture them being on the Sinai Peninsula when you see them think about them wandering? I always grew up as a young Christian thinking that's where they wandered at, right? They must have gone back to the Sinai Peninsula and wandered around there because, that makes the most sense because there's nothing out there. Right? But that's not where they were wandering at. Believe it or not, they were actually wandering where there were people. All right? And so what's interesting about these wanderings, though, is they never got to stop, but it was actually in the mountains of what is now modern Jordan. All right? And I got a picture for us to give us a general location to begin with this evening, I think. Yes. All right? It was basically, this is Jordan. This is the Dead Sea here, and this is the Red Sea there, or the finger of one of the Red Sea. All right? And so this is the Dead Sea, this is the Red Sea, and this is what would be kind of modern-day Jordan, for lack of better terms, over there. All right? And the mountain range that they literally walked around was right here. Okay? Now, let me just give you an idea of what that looks like in case you're kind of curious. All right? So from the Dead Sea down to the Red Sea tip, if they wandered in that area there, all right, you're talking about a total distance of approximately 160 kilometers or 99 miles. Okay, and let me put that in perspective for you in case that doesn't work for you to think about it that way, right? That'd be from here to Tremont in Utah, approximately. Or if you're going to go to the east, or to the west, all right, it would be from here to the Garden of Eden, right? You know that little rest stop out there in Eden, Idaho? Okay, kind of Kimberly, right between Burley and Twin Falls. All right? Or if you're going to go north, you'd get to Ashton just before you start to climb the hill into Island Park. All right? I didn't do anything to the east because it's down and over and all that fun stuff. But anyway, all right? But it's not really that big of a distance. It's not really that far of an area that they were wandering for 38 years in, making circles around and around, right? 38 years in this small area. Talk about the walking in circles. But let me show you where Mount Seir is on the map in particular, all right? So Mount Seir, you can see there again, we have the Dead Sea. Oh, it's in my hand. I'm like, where'd it go? I pointed into my hand. It didn't work. Anyway. We have the Dead Sea there. We have the Sinai, and Mount Seir is literally that little dark clump right there. Right there is Mount Seir. All right? In the middle of Jordan, we know where it's at. We're not confused by it. We know exactly where this is at. It's still there today. All right? And what's awesome about this, all right, is Mount Seir and the mountains around it, okay? Now, I think do I have another picture that shows you kind of the mountain itself? I do. That's Mount Seir. All right? And you can kind of see the mountains that are surrounding it and stuff like that, okay? And so this is what they circled for 38 years. They compassed this area for 38 years, all right? Now, here's one of the nerd out moments for us tonight, okay? This is my pop quiz for you. Anyone want to guess what biblically significant place is located in these mountains? Huh? Are you cheating? She's pulling an Eddie back there on me. Look at the pictures and all right, here's what is literally located right there. I got a picture for you. Petra. Right? So for 38 years they walked around Petra, for lack of better terms. Okay? And what I find interesting about this, okay, now, does anyone know what Petra just means, the word Petra? Rock. Just means rock. That's all. Peter, right? Remember the name Peter was given by the Lord? Upon this rock I will build my church, right? From the word Petra. Okay? So it means the rock. So in all their wanderings, while they awaited for the promised land, they walked around, and if you allow me a little bit of liberty here, with the rock. All right? But why would God choose to have them wander here? Well, who dwelt here? Let's go on. Deuteronomy chapter 2. You're getting close. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 2 through 7. All right. Here we go. And the Lord spake unto me, saying, Ye have compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you now northward. I love that, by the way. All right, I got to pause there for 1 second. The Lord's like, all right, you've walked in circles long enough. Start going north. All right, it's time for you to actually get somewhere. Okay, and let's go on. Verse 4. And command now the people, saying, Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir. And they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them, for I will not give of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. You shall buy meat for them for money, that ye may eat, and ye shall also buy water from them for money, that ye may drink. For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all thy works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord thy God hath been with thee. Thou hast lacked nothing. So there it is. What it was that God, first of all, why did God have them wandering? Of course, we could say judgment, and we could say disobedience. Well, certainly could be applied, but what reason do I see for God giving them keeping them seemingly going in circles? I think it was to learn one very important lesson that they didn't learn in their travels out of Egypt and to Kadesh Barnea to begin with. And it's said right there in verse 7, For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all thy works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord thy God hath been with thee. Thou hast lacked nothing. I think why God had this generation in particular growing up. We know all the other people had to die because of their lack of faith, right? But why God in particular had this younger generation wandering these 38 years with them was so they could see that God provided for them all the time. God never left them. God never forsook them. He was always guiding them and directing them, right? God is with you. He'll take care of you. By the way, there's something we need to understand about the wanderings. They were relatively at peace, right? There's no wars spoken about in their wanderings, okay, throughout Edom. Why? Well, we already know, okay, as they're wandering throughout Edom, we already know who's there, right? We just read it. It was Esau, okay? But because it said, And I commanded the people, saying, Ye shall pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. So their brethren, all right, in other words, they're walking in the land of their family through Esau, all right? Jacob, so you remember who Esau was. Jacob, the twin brother of Esau. Esau, his older twin brother. Jacob was the hill catcher, right? Grabbed onto his hill on his way out. And Jacob fooled Esau or tricked Esau into selling him his birthright for some porridge, right? Some lentils, some beans, basically a little stew, for lack of better terms. And so this is what he had done. And you remember, Jacob then fled after he stole the birthright, all right? And that's where he met Leah and Rachel. All right, and worked for his uncle Laban 7 years for each one of his daughters, and then that's where we get the nation of Israel from. Jacob would become Israel, right? And so, and that's where we get that nation from. Well, then he finally returns with his families and all of his kids and all the livestock that the Lord had blessed him with and with that. And on his way there, he sent forward a bunch in front of him, including his wives and children, to meet Esau first, right? He was a real man's man. He was real strong. And so he made sure his wives and children went out first in front of him, like, go greet your uncle. And if you survive, I guess I'll show up too. But anyway, so he sends him out there, and then you remember when he met with Esau, right? This is what he had to say to him in Genesis chapter 33, verses 9 through 16. It said, And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Because remember, he kept sending him gifts, right? Trying to buy his love, his affection, his acceptance, or his way out of what he had tricked him out of, for lack of better terms. And he says, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore have I seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that thou hast brought, that is brought to thee, because the God hath dealt gracious with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. And he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks of the herds with the young are with me. And the men should overdrive them one day, and the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle hath gotten before me, and the children were able to endure until I come and to see my Lord in Seir. And Esau said, Let me now leave thee with some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. So basically he says, so Esau shows up and Esau says, hey, well, we're okay. For lack of better terms, we're all right. I did well. You did well. All right. Let's go to my house and just kind of rekindle the relationship that we might have had at one point, for lack of better terms, right? Well, Jacob, still being afraid the way he was, right? It was like, no, you go ahead and go. I'll catch up later on. Right? I'll come see you. By the way, he never does. Okay, Jacob never goes to see Esau. All right? And he actually passes by a different way. But Esau does rekindle that relationship with Jacob. In Genesis chapter 36, verses 6 to 8, it says, And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the persons of his house and his cattle and all his beasts and all his substance which he had gotten in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob, for their riches were more than they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. Okay, so Esau eventually would catch up to his brother, and they start to commingle, and eventually, kind of similar to Abraham and Lot, they got too large, and Esau said, I'll go back to where I was at in Seir, and we'll be all right. All right, and Seir, or Esau, becomes the Edomites, and that's the land that they've been dwelling in these 38 years of their wanderings. All right, so for lack of better terms, they were somewhat relatively protected, aside from obviously the Lord, the greatest protection, right? But also they were dwelling with family. They were walking throughout their family lands. But notice that God instructed them particularly that as they were wandering through there, they were supposed to buy and pay for everything, right? The food, even the water, they had to pay for, right? Why? Because God never wanted anybody of the world to be able to take credit for what he did for his children. All right? It's interesting. One of the things that happens a lot at the church is I would say probably 3 or 4 times a week I get an offer from different organizations offering us money as a church. Right? We want to support you. We want to help you. We want to give. We're a nonprofit organization. We want to help out, blah, blah. And I'm like, junk folder, right? Get rid of them. Why? Because our God provides for us. I don't need the world to provide for us, right? And so we just don't do that, all right? So even though Jacob and Esau were content dwelling apart, Esau was still willing to help, if needed, his brother. Now back to where we left off in Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 8 through 15. And when we passed by from our brethren, the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, through the way of the plain of Elatah, and from Ezon-Gaber, we turned and passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. And the Lord said unto me, Distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle. For I will not give thee their land for a possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. The Emmons dwelt therein in the past. Emmons are another way you can say that, right? From we're getting Nephilims, right? Times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as Anakims, but the Moabites, called the Emmons, and the Horims also dwelt in Seir before time, but the children of Esau succeeded them. And when they had destroyed them from before them, they dwelt in their stead, as Israel did into the land of his possession, which the Lord gave unto them. Now rise up, said I, and get you over the brook Zered, And we went over the brook Zered and into the space in which we came into the Kesh from Kadesh Barnea, until we were overcome with the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the hosts, as the Lord sware unto them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from among the hosts until they were consumed. Okay, so now after they leave Edom, they're supposed to pass by the wilderness of Moab again, the same way they did the first time they were going up there, all right? After the Kadesh Barnea, they're supposed to pass by Moabites. They're not supposed to mess with the Moabites at all, okay? The Moabites were distant relatives to Israel too, through Lot, all right? Abraham's nephew. And and we know that part of Lot's problem was, all right, or for lack of better terms, the Moabites were Lot's children, all right? Their land contained the Eman or the giants, for lack of better terms, all right? And we'll run to them later on, obviously, up even to David, right? We'll be done with this. It comes from the word Rephaim in the Greek or in the Hebrew, all right, translated as giants or meaning fearsome ones. The Rephaim were a group of large warlike people who populated Canaan before the Israelites in the area east of the Jordan River. They were known by many names, all right, but the Moabites called them Eman. And so, 38 years in this brief verse, Moses covered, a little bit we've gone over, Moses has covered everything that's happened, all right? So, in other words, what Moses is about to share from this point forward, I mean, what he considered the wanderings to be, I don't want to say nothing, but they were not the point. Right? He didn't want the children, the new generation, focusing on what their parents went through. He wanted them focusing on what God was doing for them. All right? And this is, if I'm being honest with you, sometimes we run into generational bitterness. You guys know what I'm talking about when I say that? Right? And where people will focus on how their parents were and what happened in their lives and what people may have done to their parents, and they carry that bitterness into their own lives and they continue on with that, right? It reminds me of my grandmother, who's now 93 years old, right? Literally went to high school with first cousins that she never talked to because the two brothers got in a fight and separated their families. You know, as this generational thing is just ridiculous, all right? And so he wanted to forget about that, all right? But it says this now in verses 16 through 23, all right? So it came to pass, when all the men of war were consumed and dead from among the people, that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Thou art to pass over through Ar, the coast of Moab, this day. When thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee the land of the children of Ammon. Distress them not, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given it unto the children of Lot a possession. That also was accounted in the land of the giants. Giants dwelt therein in old time. The Amorites called them Zamzumians, the people great and many and tall as Anakims, but the Lord that's right. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead, as they did to the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, when they destroyed the Horims from before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead even to this day. And the Avims, which dwelt in Hezrim, even unto Azah and the Cathaprims, and which came forth from Caphathor, because I destroyed them and dwelt in their stead. Okay, so what's all this about? All right. So they would possess none of the land of the Moabites, none of the land of the Edomites, and none of the land of the Amorites. All right? And there were giants in those lands, but all the people who were in those lands had defeated those giants. All the giants still existed. Right? Which, by the way, is a pretty interesting thing when you think about this. Right? Lot, the nephew of Abraham, destroyed giants. Right? Esau, the brother of Jacob, destroyed giants. Okay? Eventually, the children of Jacob will destroy giants, right? But initially, the children of Jacob were afraid of the giants, right? Even though the giants had been defeated so many times before, all right? And so they would not possess any of the land of the Amorites. Why? Well, this was Lot's land, as possessed by the children he had with who? Anyone? His two daughters, right? So that's going to be telling, because in a minute we're going to look at a couple verses that I want you to pick up on that the Lord says about these things, okay? And you remember this, right, from Genesis chapter 19, verses 35 through 38. You remember after God had brought Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters out of Sodom before he destroyed it, right? Which, by the way, is 4 people, and all that Abram ever negotiated down with the Lord to was to 10 people, right, in the city of Sodom. He said, if there's 10 righteous in the city of Sodom, will you still destroy it? And the Lord said, if I find 10 righteous in the city of Sodom, I will not destroy it. And he couldn't even find 10, but what he did do is he took the righteous ones out before the destruction. All right? It's believe it or not, it's a metaphor or a typology of the rapture. Okay? Where you take the righteous out before destruction begins. Okay? Anyway, but we talked about that a lot when we were there, okay? But then we have this, and so in Genesis chapter 19, then Lot had fled. Remember, his wife looked back. I showed you the pillar of salt that they call Lot's wife, all right? When we went through that area, I showed you the picture there by the Dead Sea and of Lot's wife. And so Lot's wife looked back, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. He and his daughters continued on. They dwelt in the caves. And then what happens? Well, in verses 35 and 38 of Genesis chapter 19, it says this, speaking of these daughters, and they made their father drink wine that night also. All right? Why? Because they were afraid they would not be able to have, everybody they knew was destroyed. They wanted guys. They wanted children. They wanted to have this life, right? And so they got their dad, for lack of better terms, drunk, all right? And they laid down with her, and then she arose, and then thus the other daughter, both of them laid down with their daughter that night. They both bear sons, all right? The firstborn bare a son and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites. Unto this day, the younger, she also bare a son, called his the Ben-Amim, all right? And the same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. So you see now where from Lot we got the Moabites and the Ammonites, right? And so God's like, this isn't your land either. I've given it to Lot and to his children for a possession. Okay? Now this is kind of cool. I want to just pause here for 1 second. Who's giving the land? So God's establishing these nations, isn't he? Right? I want you to think about that. Okay? Sometimes we'll have arguments against Israel and the establishment of Israel and the reestablishment of Israel. Why? Because they weren't the first in the land. God gave the land to the ones he wanted them to have. Right? He gave the Ammonites their land. He gave the Moabites their land. He gave the Edomites their land. All right? But they're like, that's just not enough. Now we want Israel too. We want Jacob's share, for lack of better terms. All right? Or if you would, almost to a certain extent, Abraham's. Well, not to a certain extent, very much to the same extent, the promise to Abraham. Right? Now, you might recall the Amorites, whose main god was Molech. We talked a lot about him. All right? Molech was the god really who they did a lot of child sacrifice to. Not going to get into all the details of it again that tonight. All right? But interesting now, considering these children began by incest and now they're sacrificing their children. Right? But God says something amazing. And now in verses 24 and 25 of Deuteronomy chapter 2. You guys are like, man, we are making really good time. Yeah, we're not close to done yet. Don't worry. All right. It says, rise up, take your journey, and pass over the river Arnon. Behold, I have given into thine hand Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it and contend with him in battle. This day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear a report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. Okay, now, this is kind of cool. I think this is really cool. Now God says, go, take the possession of the land that I have given thee. So fight for what God has given thee, right? This is what it says to him. You're going to contend here now. You're going to fight for this. You're going to fight for what I have given thee, not for what he has not. Okay, I want you to let that sink in for a second. Fight for what God has given you, not for what he hasn't. All right? The early church was not about taking land, but lives. Right? Not that they killed people, okay? But they were about what was God wanting to bring into his fold? The people, not the land. right? They weren't fighting for land. They were fighting for the souls of people, for the lives of people. Look what God says about when he was giving something to his children. Those who possess it now will tremble. And I'm going to let you draw that to your own spiritual conclusion. But I'll just remind you about a promise from our Lord from Luke chapter 10, verses 18 through 20. He says, and he said unto them, I beheld, this is our Lord speaking, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I have given unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding, in this rejoice not, that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice, because your names are written in heaven. Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world, right? This is the thing we have to recognize, and this is one of the things I think as children of God, as born-again Christians, we forget, right? That we have a greater power within us than the enemy has out there. All right? So many times the church and Christians tremble at the enemy and at the world. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going out trying to pick fights with Satan. Okay? I'm not. But there's times when I've run up against him and I've had to deal with it. And I'm not afraid to deal with it. Right? Why? Because I know that my Lord is greater than him. And I don't go in my own name. Look how mighty I am. Look at these big guns. Right? I'm not like that. I'm like, do you know who you're coming up against? The same way David when he faced his giant. Right? You would defy the God of Israel. He didn't say you would defy me, David. Don't you know who I am and what I've done? Right? I killed a lion. Right? He didn't get into all that things like that. He said, no, you're defying the God of Israel. You're fighting against the God of all creation, the Almighty. And when we as children, when we're coming up against something in our own lives, as God's children need to recognize that we, I want to be careful how I say this, but we have the greater power. We've got to quit making excuses for our shortcomings and our failings. Right? Because the greater power resides within us. I'm amazed how many Christians nowadays want to blame things on the enemy. Oh, the devil made me do this week. No, he didn't. No, he did not. Guarantee you the devil didn't make you do that. Why? Because greater is he that's in you than he's in the world. You gave yourself over to that. The enemy couldn't take you there. Okay, sorry. Getting a little preachy on that one. Okay. Now, before we go on, I want the church to catch that spiritual truth, all right? But as children, we're commanded to walk or journey to the promised land, and they were instructed 3 times, and I want to look at these 3 verses, okay? Verse 5, Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 5. Catch this with me. It says this, meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for possession. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 9. And the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for possession. Deuteronomy 2:19. And when thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given unto the children of Lot for a possession. All right. I want you to catch it. 3 different times, the same word is used, okay? In verse 5, we see the word meddle, and in verse 19, we see the verse meddle. We see the word meddle. Sorry. We see the word meddle. In verse 9, the word contend is the same word as meddle. All right? So, 3 times in talking to his children as they're walking through the world on their way to the promised land, he says to them, don't meddle, don't contend with, if you would, don't mess around with the world. That's what he says. 3 times he says that to them. Don't mess with them. Don't meddle with them. Right? Why? Well, as the old saying goings, when you goings, as the old saying, people say, right? If you're going to play with fire, what's going to happen? You're going to get burnt. Right? If you're going to play at the world, you're going to get damaged. All right? It's just going to happen. All right? And so don't meddle with him. Okay? But then he goes on now. Verse 26 to 37. Hey, we're making really good time. I'm proud of us, guys. I mean, this is a whole chapter. You guys realize that? We're still 15 minutes away to the top of the hour, and we're almost through a whole chapter. Calm down. Calm down. Mr. Murray, we ain't done yet, mister. All right. Hold on, let me get a drink real quick here. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 26 through 37. And I sent messengers out of the wilderness of Kedemoth unto Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, let us pass through thy land, and I will go along by the highway. I will neither turn to the right hand nor to the left. You remember, this is the retelling. This is their first journey, right? Thou shalt sell meat for money, that I may eat, and give me water for money, that I may drink. Only I will pass through on my feet. And as the children of Israel, which dwell in Seir, on the Moabites, which dwell in Ar, did unto me, until I shall pass over Jordan into the land which the Lord our God giveth us. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him. For the Lord thy God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into thy hand, as appeareth this day. And the Lord said unto me, behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his land before thee. Begin to possess, that thou mayest inherit his land. And Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, to fight at Jahaz. And the Lord our God delivered him before us, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. And we took all his cities of the time and utterly destroyed the men and all the women and the little ones of every city. We left none to remain, only the cattle we took for a prey unto ourselves, and the spoil of the cities which we took. For Aror, which is by the brink of the river Arnon, and from the city that is by the river unto Gilead, there was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered all unto us. Only unto the land of the children of Ammon thou camest not, nor unto the place of the river Jabbok, nor unto the cities and the mountains, nor unto whatsoever the Lord our God forbade us. Okay, I want to show you a picture real quickly, and then we can come back and talk about this. Okay, so this is what we're talking about in this journey now on their way to the promised land again. Okay, when they left Kadesh Barnea, they wandered in the land of Edom. All right, and then this is the Dead Sea here, okay? Then they went through the land of the Moabites, but they didn't mess with them at all, okay? They went through the land of Ammon, but before they went through Ammon, they had to fight King Sihon, all right? Remember, we talked about that when we got there, okay? And they utterly destroyed him, and so they continued on, all right? And then next week, we're going to pick it up here, and they're going to fight King Og, all right? But this is what we're looking at here. This is all the land that they've gone through. Everything they've done, this is what they've had to do. Basically, they didn't do anything for those lands. They didn't want those lands. God didn't give them those lands. He said, I won't even give you a foot breadth in that. I don't want you to have any of that. That's not your possession. All right? But I'm going to give you the possession that is yours. All right? And they're going to go on and fight for it, and this will become theirs. All right? And this will become theirs up here, because that's where Manasseh and half the tribe Manasseh and, help me out. Who's the other two tribes? Reuben and Gad? I think it is. Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe Manasseh are going to dwell over there. Okay? So when he fights there, the Lord's going to give them that part of their possession. That's what he's basically saying. Okay? Because that will be theirs. Now, if you're anything like me, though, and you pictured all the history taking place of, I always pictured it being a much larger area, all the history of Israel, didn't you? Like it was like huge. And this is a very centralized area. It's a very small area, all things considered. All right? Matter of fact, if you take that, I think, if I remember right, if you take that whole area of the Middle East, and that's not even the full Middle East, but if you take all the Middle East to what they consider the Middle East today, it only takes up 60% of America. All right? And so that's where it's at. Now, one verse I want to catch as we come to a close tonight, and we'll spend the rest of our time here, what should get us done in time. All right. I want you to look back now at chapter 2, verse 36 with me, okay? It says this, from Aror, which is by the brink of the river Arnon, and from the city that is by the river, even to Gilead, there was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered all unto us. Okay. This is huge. That statement in of itself that Moses said is huge. Of everywhere they had to fight and all that they will have to fight, not one area was too great for them to fight. Okay? And in particular, he says this, there was not one city too strong for us. Okay, why? Well, now I want you to turn with me back to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13. And when you get there, in the interest of time, we're going to read verses 27 through 28. Numbers chapter 13, verses 27 through 28. It says, and they told him and said, we came unto the land whither thou sentest us. This is the spies, by the way. This is when the spies returned and discouraged the people. Okay? And they told them and said, we came unto the land whither thou sent us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. So those who rejected going into the promised land the first time, that first generation, what was one of their complaints? The cities are too great for us. The walls are too big. We can't fight. We can't overcome this, right? And read it one more time with me now. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 36, just at the end there, it says, there was not one city too strong for us. Why? The Lord our God delivered all unto us. And by the way, one of the things I love that the Lord said to the children of Israel, he gave a promise about the lands they were going in to possess and the cities they were going to have to take. He said, I am putting the fear of you in their hearts. And for those of you who know I've talked about this before, but when we finally get into the book of Joshua, when we look at Jericho, right, that one of the things that Rahab, the harlot, is going to say when the spies show up at Jericho, she's going to say to them, the fear of you, speaking of Israel, has been in our hearts since the crossing of the Red Sea. Right? So basically, if you allow me, 40 plus years ago, we got scared that you guys were coming to destroy us. Think about that, living in fear of Israel for 40 years while God was dealing with his children walking in circles. Anyway, all right. Now, they said the walls were too great, right? So the walls they saw were so great, but was not because they went by their own sight and not the Lord's. See, the Lord said, I'm giving it to you. This is yours. And they acknowledged that nothing was too great for us because our Lord was with us, right? So, in other words, when we give to the Lord helps them to overcome. And one of the problems I think we face, and let me rephrase it. Let me ask you guys a question. What in your life right now do you see as too high of a wall, too great of a city for you? Can I suggest, rather than looking at the size of the wall, look at the size of your God? Right? Because there's nothing too great for the Lord. There's nothing too big for God. Right? Instead of seeing what's in front of you, keep your eye, if it's keeping you from taking possession of the victory and taking land, look at what the Lord has promised you. Remember, the same God who is doing this for these is still with you today. Still doing the same for his children today. As a matter of fact, turn with me and we'll close with this tonight. John chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. We're going to get done. Well, I'm going to get done early. I don't know about Mr. Ronk, but I'm going to get done early. 1 John chapter 5, verses 4 through 5 says this. And I learned from Sunday that I have plenty more time because none of you rebelled against my son. 1 John chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Who is he that overcometh the world? But he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God. We're still the overcomers, right? By faith we overcome. Not by sight, by faith. Doesn't matter how big the walls you think you're up against right now are, have faith in the one who can overcome. Let's pray.